Okay, so in this segment, I'm going to talk about discrimination, or I'm going to start talking about discrimination. And the first question I'm going to come up with is, how do we measure discrimination? And this is, sort of not the easiest thing in the world. So let me sort of give an example of how we might walk through something like this. And I have to have my notes so I can have my correct facts and figures here. So if we go out there and look at, say, men and women, what we're going to see from the 2000 census, so 2010, is the average female worker made or had income that was 77% of the average male worker. So, question, what does that allow us to say about discrimination? Well, we want to really make sure we're measuring apples and apples here. So one thing we know is true is that on average, women tend to work fewer hours than men. So more women are part-time, and among the part-time, the women work somewhat less, and that may be due to discrimination in the labor market. It may also be that women are tied down with responsibilities at home that men are able to, shirk and impose on women. So there might be discrimination that's going on places outside the labor market. And so one thing we might look at here is, well, what if we confine our measurement to full-time workers? So if we go ahead and look at this in terms of full-time, so the average full-time female worker compared to the average full-time male worker, then this changes to 81%. So you can see how, when we compare apples and apples, we can potentially explain some of the differences. Instead of there being a 23% gap between men and women, we now have a 19% gap between men and women. And there are lots and lots of different ways in which men and women's labor market experiences are different. So the standard way that economists go about this is they really try to compare apples and apples, and they try to sort of zoom in as much as possible and include all the different things that could explain the differences. So, could be something like, well, when people graduate from college, what degree do they graduate with a major in? And we know that a higher percentage of male college graduates take courses in things like engineering, which tend to pay more, and a higher percentage of women take degrees in the humanities, which tend to pay a little bit less. Or if we look at what particular industries men and women work in, we know that men and women work in different industries, somewhat more different industries. Women are more likely to work in retail, which is a relatively low-paying sector of the economy. Men are more likely to work in manufacturing or finance, which tend to be relatively higher-paying sectors of the economy. So, there are lots and lots of things that could go out there and explain this. Or we know that because women have a higher share of the burden of taking care of children and also older relatives, that women are more likely to take time out from their careers. And so at any given age, women are likely to have fewer years of experience, which could arguably impact their productivity and thus their value to a firm. So we try to control for as much of this stuff as possible. And notice that some of the things we're talking about could be the result of discrimination. But they might be discrimination that, say, happens in school. Why do women take more humanities degrees and less science or engineering degrees? Is that because of something that's happening in school or images they're getting from the media or something like that? Or why is it that, women take out more time to care for children and elderly people? Well, there's some things going on inside households where there's an inequality in terms of the burden sharing of caring for dependents. But if we're really interested in measuring the discrimination in the labor market, then we want to make sure we measure apples and apples in the labor market. And when you sort of throw in all the relevant apples and apples comparisons here, you get results that go something like that. You know, if we compare full-time female college-educated majors with a degree in the humanities who are working in the retail industry to full-time white male, et cetera, it's a degree in the humanities working in the retail industry, and they have the same number of years of job experience, what can we say about their wages? So when we really get down to the maximum apples and apples comparison, or as close, so we're at least down to like Granny Smith apples and like Red Delicious apples. What we see here is that women make 5 to 10% less per hour. After we've included all this stuff about, experience and what their college major was and that kind of stuff. And even then, it's really hard to know what this indicates. So if women are going into industries that are lower paying, is that because they're discriminated against in the industries that are higher paying and are more male dominated? Or is that a voluntary choice that they're making? Or if we go out there and see that women are choosing college majors that put them in career paths that are lower paying, is that a voluntary choice because they've made a compensating differential choice that they would prefer something that's maybe less high stress? Or is it that they're going to go ahead and they feel they've been steered into that by social forces? And we also have things like it's really hard to estimate the value of fringe benefits. And there's some evidence that women go into jobs that have a higher ratio of their compensation as fringe benefits in terms of health insurance and that kind of thing, whereas men may be just more about the money in terms of just straight wages. Then even if we did know all those things, we would potentially have the following sort of question that is almost just really impossible to answer. So there's an expression that sometimes people have to work twice as hard to be thought half as good. So if other people have a negative image of the competence of women or the competence of underrepresented minorities, then even if they're working harder than other people and being more productive than other people, then the firms or employers may think that they're less productive and therefore may underpay them relative to their productivity, even though on paper it looks like they're the same as some other worker out there. So I think I would say anyone who knows how much discrimination happens or how much discrimination doesn't happen is vastly overstating their case. It's really, really hard to say much about exactly how much discrimination happens. I think this is about as good as you can get. But even this kind of number we should not be super confident in. It could be higher and it could be lower. It could be either. But that would be something like my best guess out there.